session of this year's first e-conference of the Global Young Academy. We are delighted to close the e-conference with a splash, with a bang. We have two outstanding external speakers with us. My name is Robert Lebanese. I'm a member of the executive committee of the Global Young Academy. And together with me, there's Shabana Khan, who is a GYA alumnus, who will be co-moderating, and of course, Anindita Badra, who is the GYA co-chair. And I'm delighted to introduce the two external speakers that we have with us. And for this, I'm going to quickly share my screen so you see their pictures in full. So we have Pallav Bagla, who was described to me by Anindita as the person who covers everything related to science in India, which is quite a big announcement, but I think you will agree that this is true. He's a photojournalist, a science communicator, correspondent for Science Mag, is a videographer and photographer, and has been a former science editor for NDTV. We also have Luis Quevedo, who is a science communicator, scientist turned science communicator, biotechnologist, if I'm not mistaken, by training, and then a science communicator by training, a podcaster, filmmaker, known for Science Friday in Espanol, and a co-founder of a Spanish language podcast network, something I hope we can talk a little bit about later, and who teaches science communication, which is also very interesting for us as the Global Young Academy, as a global network of young scientists around the world who not just want to communicate science, but also learn how to train other people to communicate science. And with this, I pass on to Anindita to lead the beginning of the discussion. And then later on, after 45 minutes, we will go into breakout rooms and to a more internal part of the session.
Thanks, Robert, and a very warm welcome to both Louis and Pallav. It's a great pleasure to have you. It's an honor to have you, and I'm really delighted that for this particular panel, we could begin day before yesterday, 48 hours back, with two of our speakers from the GYA. And then we are ending the panel with a wrap-up session today with, again, two of our speakers online to have an open discussion where our members can participate. I know how busy both of you are, so thanks for making time out and being here with us. So just to introduce very briefly what the Global Young Academy is. So we, as the name suggests, we are global and we think we are young. Because the average age of the membership is around 35, and we are definitely global because we span across 6 continents. We have members from all over the world, but we are always trying to get more diverse and more inclusive and find countries which are not included in our membership currently and expand. So our members and alumni are a huge network today. We have about 200 members who are active members and 300 alumni. So we are a big organization, and we are interested in engaging with society, with young scientists across the world, with policymakers, trying to bring forth the voice of young scientists to the platform where it can be heard. We believe in spreading the word of science, in spreading scientific rigor as a way of thinking. And various working groups work on various aspects of science engagement, science communications, science policy interface, science diplomacy. But at the bottom of our hearts, this is what we believe in. This is what we want to do. We want to engage with society. We want to engage with a network of young scientists across the world. And we want to bring forth the voice of young scientists to places where it's typically not heard. So that is what the Global Young Academy tries to do. And this year, we, for the first time, had to go for a completely virtual e-AGM and an e-conference. So we had a 2-week-long e-AGM, which was internal, and then a 2-week-long e-conference, which is going to end with this panel today in its live session, but the discussion will go on because we've gone completely virtual, we've gone completely public. All the talks by our speakers on the different panels, by our well-wishers are up there on the Global Young Academy YouTube channel for everyone to see, comment on, and engage with us. So we are actually trying to expand our reach through this e-conference beyond our membership and alumni to a large number of people across the board through our social media platforms. And that's why this panel is again something very close to our heart, because we would like to learn from you how we can do this even better. So I will not spend more time talking to you about the Global Young Academy. I'm going to invite Shabana to briefly introduce the members here to the idea of the breakout sessions. And then we have questions lined up for our two speakers. We have all heard your talks on our YouTube channel, have been highly impressed and energized, and we are going to come back with questions. The idea is we have a couple of questions for each of you, which we will address to you, and you can of course answer in whatever way you please. And then we will open up for discussion, and we would also be very happy if our two speakers would engage with each other in this discussion. So this is what we are going to do in the first half of the session, and then we are going to go into breakout rooms, which is going to be more of a member driven engagement where we will discuss your talks a little more and come back and close the session. So Shabana, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Well, a very warm welcome. Thank you so much for joining here. And on 7th, we had really a very great discussion about all the topics about how engagement at large we can better facilitate. And today we are having two wonderful speakers with us. So we are very much looking forward to your discussion, and I really invite you to join us in our breakout sessions as well. So in each, there will be 3 breakout sessions, and in each session we will be discussing almost about 2 questions, and it is going to go for about 20 minutes. And the intention is we not only dig deeper into those questions, but also come out with a few take-home message for GYA, how GYA can better engage with public at large and how we can contribute better to the society. So really looking forward to it. So we have, so we are now open to the discussion by our speakers, and then we will go to the breakout session straight away. So over to you.
Thank you, Shabana. So I will begin with a question directed towards Pallav. Pallav, you are someone who does a lot of science communication in both English and in Hindi in India. And you have also spoken in your video about the need for science communication in the vernacular languages. So in the Global Young Academy, we also believe in this. So often we have statements or even our advertisement where we put up calls for new members. We try to get these translated into different languages so that we can reach out to a larger audience across the world. We had a COVID statement, which has been translated into, I think, 27 different languages by now. So we are trying to do this, but we would like to have your inputs on how, because the Global Young Academy, English is the main language of communication for us. So how we could do this better, and especially when we are talking about communication not just among our members but across, in society across continents, how can we engage better in vernacular languages? Even maybe all members do not speak the language, but probably we could engage in the local language with people in different countries. So what would be your inputs on that?
A very simple input: learn more languages, be multilingual. That is the simple solution. Easier said than done. India had a prime minister who used to speak 10 or 11 languages, which included global languages. That was Prime Minister P.V. Narasimha Rao. And he made long changes for India, long-standing changes. Now, I understand that the language of science for scientists in the world is English. By and large, it remains English as a way of communication. The key journals where scientists publish all the big names are all in the English language. But that does not mean that has to remain the way in which science is done and science is communicated. All of us are born with a mother tongue. All of us learn the mother tongue in a very fluent manner. And most of us think, whether we like it or not, in our mother tongues. So many a time I tell people, people think in Hindi, then speak in English. And that is where a lot of time a garbled communication happens. When scientists speak to themselves, they anyway talk in a language which only scientists understand. And many a time you need people like Lewis and myself and other journalists and communicators to first learn the language of the scientist and then talk in a language which is without jargon and take it to the people. That is an art which needs to be learned, and some of the best scientists I have seen are extremely good communicators, especially people who turn out to be finally becoming managers of science, you see, are invariably good communicators, whether it is in English or Spanish or in Hindi or Tamil or whichever language. Japanese, Chinese, Mandarin. I think today Chinese, if people knew Mandarin, I think a lot of solutions would be available to fight the COVID-19 crisis, because people would be able to read what is happening within the mainland of China. So I think being a global academy, you already have the strength, because I presume there will be people whose native language is not English. And very early in my career, I was told if somebody doesn't speak English, that is not his fault. It is your fault that you don't understand a second language or a third language. So the time has come for people to understand many languages, and especially if you're working in India, oh my God, we have at least over 20 official languages. I can speak and talk only in 2. So we have a complex problem here. You pick up any currency note in India, it has notations in 26 different dialects. These are written scripts. So it's a complex problem, but then every country would have, by and large, a mainstream language, and that should be used. But I have constantly emphasized that people need to start talking science in their mother tongue. The common man on the street understands so much more when it is spoken in a language which is their own. I communicate, like you said, in English. मैं हिंदी भी बोलता हूँ, which is now I'm speaking Hindi. Hindi is the language of the people in India, a vast majority of them, not all of them. And my audience in Hindi is much larger. So I urge people to speak in their mother tongue, especially when they are communicating with the lay audience. But within scientists also, increasingly people should look at having their own journals in their own languages for their own countries. For too long have we relied on a clutch of journals which are controlled by multinational corporations or by a small group of associations. And that needs to be broken, because people need to know, the taxpayer needs to know in their country what is happening, and this needs to be a lot of it in open source. I would rest my case for the time being, Anandita. I have very strong views on these areas, but speaking more languages is always good.
So I'm better than you. I speak and read and write 3.
You are a good scientist and a good communicator.
Thank you. So Louis, I will actually continue that question with you, because you do science communication both in Spanish and in English. And I would like to hear your views on what we are discussing right now.
Sure. Well, first, let me thank you, all the Global Young Academy members, for letting me be part of this. This is truly an honor, and all the more so sharing the screen with Palav. So thank you. Really, it's a treat. I do, and if I may do a precision, I'm actually from Barcelona in Spain, so I do speak Catalan. My native language is not Spanish, it's Catalan. Then I learned Spanish, and then I learned some English. I couldn't agree more with Palav. I do believe that, and I think everyone who's done the littlest part of anything that has to do with communication knows that the success of one's messaging depends on somebody else being convinced, persuaded. And that is always easier to do. It's more emotionally compelling when you do it in their language, with their words. Now, if you can afford to speak that language, or at least to try, because sometimes even trying is enough to win a smile on the other side, and perhaps win a few inches towards your persuading the other person. I think it's fundamental. In the Spanish language world, I believe that the last 10, 15 years have been very important. We used to have mostly English sources. Then we had a handful of Spanish language publications, but not many, really. And most, interestingly, I don't know about in India, I would love to know from you guys, but they used to be translations. So you would read an article in a broken Spanish, because it's never all that good when you translate, but also the names, the bylines are foreign. So it's difficult, right? Not the metaphors, not the expressions, not the cases or the examples ring true to you, to your experience. So I think that is fundamental. I was lucky enough that while in New York, while working for NPR, I was producing in English for the Science Friday regular weekly show. But Ara Flato and the team allowed me to sort of toy with the technical aspects and produce a Spanish language podcast. And to me, that was a really it was a learning experience, because I saw how communicating directly in my native language, in Spanish, but not to Spain, of course. I was in New York, so it was more Hispanic US and Latin America, made a difference, right? Perhaps in the relationship that you establish with your audience or listeners, or it is fundamental. Now, the big problem with your original question is, I do believe that organizations of scientists should internally communicate in English, because that's the way, right? We all work, while keeping tabs on doing what I like to call culturally relevant communication. So it's not only about translating things, but translating the meanings, right? The expressions, the cases, the examples. That is fundamental. We and I finish with this. We did something together with three amazing scientists, Hispanic scientists, while in New York, called Manifiesto por la Ciencia en Español, no? Like a manifesto for science in Spanish. That it was published in Scientific American, and it was precisely addressing how non-culturally relevant science communication misses the point very often. So I do believe in that, very much so.
Thanks, Lewis. So I will actually ask a connected question to you, because you also do a lot of teaching of science communication. So, when you are communicating with your students who would learn to communicate science eventually, learning from that, what would your advice be to people like us, members of young academies, members of the Global Young Academy, of how to do it better? Because we don't, of course, have formal training in science communication, but we need to do that quite often. So what would be your kind of piece of advice for scientists who want to communicate science?
I think, I think two things for me are fundamental. First, it is not something that you can learn quickly, because it's you need to practice and you need to manifestly change a lot of synapses in your brain. You need to change. It's like learning a new instrument if you play something, or a new sport when you're a newbie, right? So you do need to train, and this is not trivial. You need to train, because otherwise there's a lot of people who kind of find frustration early on because they don't deliver, and you don't deliver because it takes a lot of time. Because why? And this is my second point. Because I come from biotechnology, and that's you were spot on, Robert. I used to be a biotechnologist, and one thing that it's common, I think, across all scientific disciplines is that whenever you find a new technique that is of interest to you, you tend not to do it on your own. You tend to reach out to somebody who is proficient, right? And knows about that. Why? Because you respect that. You know how hard it is to be proficient in a new technique, right? Well, more often than not, science communication, or communication in general, just because academicians know how to read and write and speak, they tend to confound academic speak with communications, like in advertising, for instance, right? What I mean by that, sorry, I'm being too confusing probably. What I mean is that communicating, science or not, communicating, it is a field of expertise that you must train and learn from people who know more than you. Like the first time that you wanted to make an HPLC, you needed somebody who knew it before you, right, to teach you. And that is something that I find pretty frustrating. I found in the past frustrating. Now I'm kind of used to it. But whenever I started a course, and it was particularly so with highly skilled, highly successful scientists, because you are successful and because you know how to do a lot of really tricky things. So you tend to assume, and rightly so, that, well, communicating, just give me 3 pointers and I'll nail it. And it doesn't work that way. It takes a lot of practicing and studying. And I said that in my short talk on the one that's on YouTube right now, is that you need to change the way you think. And this is fundamental. And I'm sure that Pallav can tell more things and more profound things than I can on the respect. But you need to change your priorities. The people outside academia is not interested in the things that you are interested. And if you want to win them for your side, you need to speak to them, to their interests in their words, not only in their language, but also in their interests. And that's the fundamental thing.
I will actually ask Pallav to comment on that.
Oh, certainly. I occasionally talk to leaders of Indian science and to people within labs in trying to make them familiar with the art of science communication. Sometimes people learn, sometimes people don't learn. And many a time I have seen leaders get catapulted into their positions for various reasons, and they suddenly start a need to have a press conference or an engagement with the public, and they have probably never seen that ever in their lives. I shouldn't say that, but most journalists, when they come for their press conference, most of them are doing many other things. Like I do all kinds of sciences, not just biotechnology and not just coronavirus, or even mathematics to space, to astronomy, to deep oceans. And I'm not probably aware of what is happening, say, in the deep folds of the brain, which somebody wants to talk about and say that they found a cure for Alzheimer's. I may not be aware. And many a time scientists talk a language which is not understood. And then when journalists pose questions, I have seen the best of the managers completely lose their cool. Uh, I do many interviews of top scientists, top people, and I have seen the kind of boo-boos they make during interviews. Uh, Sometimes I have told them, uh, this is your first interview. You better learn how to do what you need to do. I'm giving you a little leeway. Next time, if you have to run it, we would probably run only the boo-boos on television and repeat them in a loop. If you become the director of the main lab in India and you don't know how to do science communication, then it's not a good idea to be in that position. I'm not saying that all scientists are bad, that all scientists need to communicate, but most who reach a top level need to know to do that. In the current scenario, I'm sure Louis would agree, we have the classic case of Dr. Anthony Fauci, a good scientist. Last, what, 40 years he's been doing what he has been doing. I have personally interviewed him several times when he's visited India. And look at the way he's conducting his public communication and with President Donald Trump on his side. And you can imagine how tough it is for him to keep a poker face and yet continue doing and talking good science. And that requires years and years and years of experience and training. And Louis is right. Many of these things need to be taught to people, and science communication should become an integral part of the training exercise for graduate students, because from that level, if students start learning the art of communication, and please trust me, good communicators will be able to get far better grants from granting agencies and get the attention of policymakers and ministers who dole the money out. These people, they will not know the nitty-gritty of the science. They will not know why a particular wasp wags its tail on the left side or the right side, but they would certainly want to know why a wasp bites me and why a wasp sting can it be disabled in some way when a wasp stings me. And I'm sure this rings truly with a co-panelist, Anandita, who has dealt with many of these wasps, and so have I. So see, we need to understand who we are talking to, what we are talking about, and talk in a language, like Louis said very correctly in the beginning, it's the listener which is more important than the speaker. You may say what you want to say, but if it doesn't get translated to the person who's listening, the whole message is defeated in that. And the purpose of communication is completely defeated. And that is where I strongly feel a training exercise is always a good idea. One of the first things I learned, I'm not a trained journalist. I never trained in television. I never trained in photography. One of the first things I learned was to be an extremely good listener. A journalist needs to be a good listener. And only then can you translate in a language people understand. But fortunately for me, I'm not sure whether Louis uses the visual medium. I also do still photographs, and those still photographs transcend all languages. A good picture can tell a good story, and a good picture can reverberate across the world. So if I did a photograph of the clean blue sky with the main monument in Delhi, the India Gate, as it looked during the lockdown, which suggested that the pollution level came down in India after the lockdown happened, it did not need a caption. It just needed to say, this is the blue sky from a city which was considered the world's worst polluted city till a few days ago. End of story. A picture said so many more things. So I also emphasize to scientists, whenever you do communication, please look at animations, photographs, videos, GIFs, all kinds of stuff. Also look at short videos. Today in India, we can't talk about TikTok, but globally look at TikTok, Instagram, all kinds of social media where you can put out short videos. Short videos are amazingly engaging to the public. Simple short videos. And online is the way forward. Ink on print is getting a passe. So online is the way forward, and social media offers an immense opportunity for scientists to do a lot of stuff which they needed to do. Over to you, Anandita.
I will actually ask Robert to comment. He is our TikTok guy.
I am, but I've heard about the relationship of India and TikTok, which is interesting for international science communicators, to say the least. I wanted to ask Luis something about radio and audio. So moving from photography to audio and the importance of podcasting, because I read in one of his interviews once that if he was asked if he had more money, what would he want to fund? He said radio programming. Is it worth? I mean, what should an organization like the GYA get involved in podcasts? And if the answer is yes, how and who?
I am deeply enamored with podcasting, so I'm partial. So please take my answer with a grain of salt or two. But yes, I'll say why. There are a handful of reasons, though. I do come from the written press, and I mostly earn my living through television and documentaries. So I use a lot of images. But nevertheless, audio is for me king when it comes to science. It is true, though, that oftentimes visualizing something that's tricky helps a lot. But for everything else, audio has at least three virtues. First, I do believe that it is the most natural way to understand, to gain knowledge. I mean dialogue. So people talking and exploring ideas, it is oftentimes easier to understand or easier to think yourself in somebody else's shoes when they're conversing. It is how movies work, essentially. So that's not that different. But podcasting, especially for an organization such as GYA, has another virtue which is, I think, quintessential for its validity, which is, first, it is very inexpensive when you compare it to video production. Not only in editing time and resources, but actually capturing audio. I mean, I was when Pallav was speaking, I was saying, man, like you're. I love how we think the same way, because one of the things that I tell my students is that please don't cry. You do have a smartphone, then you can produce and you can learn how to shoot decent, not professional, but decent pictures, videos, edit audio. You can do a lot of stuff with an Android or iOS based smartphone. It is very cheap to produce high quality podcasting. And third, podcast has another thing that I really enjoy, which is it's very intimate. Especially if you use earbuds, there are people talking to you within your ears. They can speak directly to you, or you can be privy to an intimate conversation. All the while, you can keep on doing perhaps exercise, perhaps the groceries, perhaps, I don't know, driving back to school or what have you. It doesn't matter. It's very intrusive when you compare it to video. I do know, and again, I do most of my work on television, so I know the powerful. I know how video is. I know it's king when it comes to draw attention, but it's actually very demanding. I do believe that when you want to convey knowledge, if you can do it with audio, it's always going to be better. It's less intrusive, it's more intimate, it's less expensive, so you can do more or better for the same budget, the same price. And never forget that podcasting is not supposed to be synchronous. So it's okay if you listen to yesterday's podcast or last week's. It's okay. That convenience is also a plus for podcasting. Whereas with video, there's a tendency to the fear of missing out, right? Like it streamed and I wasn't there. To me, it's rather more calm, the audio, and that's the handful of reasons that I do believe support podcast supremacy when it comes to science. Now, one final note. It is of interest to notice how after the 2007, 8, 9 great hit, financial hit, while journalism was going down, perhaps you know, and you follow a lot of science shows that especially popped up in the States with, of course, Radio Lab, but also a lot, a really crowded front of deeply interesting and well produced science shows that were not only science-y, like the latest Science, Nature, Cell papers, but also with a lot of popular interest. I am fascinated by the kind of, I don't know, perhaps you know Gastropod. Gastropod is an amazing show that a lot of people don't know. It's about science because it's about food and history, but there's a lot of science. So I think possibilities are quite infinite when it comes to podcasting.
Thanks, Louis. Actually, this reminded me, I have a friend who suddenly sent me a WhatsApp a few days back saying, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts while cooking because I hate cooking. And this is helping me do the cooking and during the lockdown. And I just discovered a podcast by you in Scientific American. So, that's how fun podcast could be for people because, for me, I always think I kind of relate to this, human emotion of storytelling because we grow up hearing stories. In a way, podcasts are like somebody telling you a story where you are not really doing something too much about following it but just listening on. So I guess that's why many of us would probably relate to radio shows and podcasts quite a bit. I have a question for both of you, but I'll direct it to Pallav and then Felix. Pallav and then Louis. The question is from Felix, who is a GYM member. So he's saying, I would ask both the panelists about how we scientists could build and improve a sound relationship with scientific journalists. I feel that scientists turned into science communication are not so well welcomed by science journalists. So comment on that first, Pallav, and then Louis, please.
Two things. One, a good journalist will never be friendly to his sources. A good journalist will have a slightly adversarial position with his sources. That is the nature of journalism. We cannot be hand in glove with the people we are reporting because today I may report something they like. Tomorrow I may report something they don't like. And as they say, there is a very thin line between being a blue-eyed boy and getting a black eye. That's it. There's another point I always tell people. All good relationships are built during peacetime. When a very big story breaks, that is the time when good journalists and good scientists, if they have had a talk or discussions when the going was not so tough, it always helps. So all the people who are doing good work on the coronavirus pandemic in India, most of them have had some kind of interaction at some point or the other in their careers or in my career. And that always helps for two-way traffic. One, a journalist needs to intrinsically trust his or her source, because many things come to you off the record, many things come in a fashion which is not always ready for reporting. And the same way, scientists also need to know that if they are speaking to a journalist and it is off the record and it is still some work which is cooking, and that they are just telling you so that you are abreast of it and you know what is the, in Hindi they say the Lakshman Rekha, or the boundary which you should not cross. So having conversations during peacetime is an extremely important thing for doing good science and good science communication. If you look at politicians, they are masters at this business of talking to journalists when they are not in power, and letting them know their views in general. Many people clam up after they come to a position of power, but by and large, I have seen people want to communicate, people want to get their message out into the public, and both journalists, documentary filmmakers, and today increasingly influencers on social media, they can make a tremendous difference. And I concur with Luis that podcasts are a very important tool and not used very often to its best capacity by many scientists. And I also use a mobile phone to do almost everything I do. And today, this phone can give me very, very high quality work. I can get 4K video on this. I can get broadcast quality audio on this. I can do my editing on this. I can put it on air. Let's say if there is good bandwidth from Timbuktu or from any place, let's say from Fukushima, if there's a disaster happening there, if there's good bandwidth, I can put it out from there. The days for having those very large studios and very large investment in equipment, I think are passé. A lot of the high-end television networks are moving towards doing what is called Mojo, which is mobile and online journalism. And Mojo is the way forward. And I also urge scientists, people like me need video clips. We need audio bites. We need video bites. And sometimes we cannot be far away into your laboratory. So just use your mobile phone and record and put them on YouTube, or send me on WeTransfer or on Google Drive or whatever, and then we can use them. So today, the bar for recording good quality audio video has come down. But that does not mean that the very best quality will not come from the very best producers and very best equipment. I'm sure the kind of equipment which Luis uses is high-end audio video equipment, and that will always have its place. But that does not mean that you can't do online work and make your presence felt with an average smartphone. So today, a good quality Android phone or a good quality, what's it called, an Apple phone. In India, we don't use Apple, so I'm not very familiar with the iOS system. I've used them for a few years, but we are Android users. So they are amazing phones. And today, a phone is like a simple phone is like a satellite television network in itself. You can do podcast, you can do photographs, you can do video, you can do so many things on those apps. Somebody like me has become very busy because of that, and it takes too much of my time trying to do and learn new apps. Today, a journalist has to do, it's a one-man army normally, and one has to do everything on its own. Earlier, one would take a picture and send it to a photo editor, and they would put a caption and they would put it online. Today, I am expected to do everything on my own. And sometimes after taking a picture and to put it online for Getty Images to start using. I spend more time in editing and writing the caption. Captioning is critical in a picture. The IPTC format takes so much time. The same thing applies to good quality video. So there are many things which need to be learned, but it's fun. If you can't do communication, then you become like a hermit. And hermits can be good scientists. That does not mean that you reach out to the public. You become a good hermit, you become a good sage. I have a yoga picture sitting behind me. I do my yoga 90 minutes a day. That gives me my peace of mind. But that does not mean I can communicate while I'm meditating. I think there is a long way to go if one can do that.
Thanks, Pallav. Louis, you want to comment on that briefly?
Sure. Let me follow one of Pallav's leads. He mentioned how useful it is for scientists to produce their own sound bites or videos. So let me do the Machiavellian side. Let me give you, the scientist, a few tips on how to manipulate. Okay, then the work of journalists is not to be manipulated, but you must try. How can you maximize the control over the final message? If you make things simpler for journalists, they will thank you, and perhaps your message will be less manipulated, less worked over by them. So if you train yourself and you do your homework and you already know how to explain your science, your topic of interest in sound bites of 30, 60, 90 seconds, if you already have a handful of pictures or a handful of video clips wherein you explain or you show, or both ideally, your topic of interest, and it sort of fits in those 30, 60, 90 seconds, if you extrapolate from this to train in front of a mirror perhaps, or taping yourself on your smartphone and then reviewing your expositions, that can go a long way in making their life, the journalist's life, easier, and your message more similar to what you intended in the first time. So it's a win-win situation if you do that with, and that's the point, you need to work on it before you receive the call from the journalist.
Cool. I think that's a sound piece of advice for many of us. We are going to wrap up in 2 minutes before we go to the breakout session. So I'm going to ask one last question to each of you, and then we are going to close and go to the breakouts. So Louis, a very short question for you. What is the best way in which we can recommend that science communication gets added to curricula at undergrad levels? There's a question also coming from Anna on similar lines.
Mm-hmm. I do believe there's one strong argument, which is there are an increasing number of papers that analyze the influence of narrative quality and SciComm quality in papers on citations. And also, as Pallav was mentioning earlier, if you communicate better, you are best than your peers at conferences, writing and getting grants, and basically moving through this human world. This is a human world. And only next is a science world. First, you need to deal with people, and people need to be communicated effectively. So I do believe that it improves your papers and it improves your posters and oral presentations. That should be a skill that young scientists learn so that their careers may be fostered even more.
Thank you. Pallav, I'm going to kind of shift gear from general communication and ask you a more specific question, because you've been covering COVID so actively in India. And you know the amount of fake news and pseudoscience which is floating everywhere. And then, there's a lot of news in the media about all of this propaganda, and then scientists trying to fight this, and then there are policymakers, politicians who are at a different level, so you are the people who are communicating with the likes of us, and then the politicians and policymakers, and then your job is to filter out everything and take it out to the public. So what would be the, best advice in this case? How do you work around this?
First and foremost, drop the word fake news. That's a favorite of President Donald Trump. And I don't think we need to be followers of President Donald Trump or Prime Minister Narendra Modi or President Putin. We need to use the word disinformation. Journalists don't do fake news. Our jobs run on giving the correct news to people. Fake news is generally done by, given out by people who have deep vested interest in getting their message across. And usually it is done by people who have no linkage to the vast mainline news networks. And in that, I think we should leave Fox News and Republic TV out of that. There are some of them we need to leave out. But by and large, disinformation is what is done. And many of us encounter that on a daily basis. I get messages, I get calls, and you essentially have to ping the right people to get to know what is the fact and what is not the fact. It's not that we don't make mistakes. We do make mistakes. When you work, you will make mistakes. But by and large, the filtering process in a news organization and a good news organization would take care that factual errors and especially disinformation doesn't go out. At the scientist level, if somebody plays dirty with me once, then you know who gets blacklisted on the very first instance. And it's a two-way process. A scientist gives you wrong information, you blacklist them. And if a journalist plays dirty, obviously the scientist also blacklists journalists. So it's a two-way process. And in this, ultimately, the correct picture filters out slowly but steadily. I very much liked what Louis said on the point that scientists can get their message right by giving the right sound bites, and they can, in a way, manipulate what is there, or I should say they can try and get what their message is. But if you go wrong, and you go wrong in a very big way, you will be caught out. Look at the work which happened on the hydroxychloroquine. Two of the finest journals of the world, the Lancet and an even better journal, the New England Journal of Medicine, both published papers on the hydroxychloroquine affair. Both were caught out. Both had to retract the papers. So if you do something wrong today with the plethora of media, people get caught out very soon. And that happens in science, that happens in journalism, that happens even in documentary filmmakers. You can't get away by giving wrong information again and again and again. As they say, you can fool some people all the time, but you can't fool all the people sometimes. So somebody is there who's smarter than me, who knows more about the subject I'm writing, and they will catch me out if I'm doing something wrong. And it applies two-way to scientists, it applies two-way to journalists. Journalists get caught out almost immediately. When I was writing for newspapers, early morning, I would know what is the feedback on my story and how many brickbats come my way. And as journalists, you need to know how to handle both brickbats and bouquets, and both come in equal measure. So it is not hard, and disinformation will always be there. It has always been there from the very beginnings when Adam and Eve were there and you had apples and whether serpents were there and they need to be eaten or not eaten. Disinformation has existed. But ultimately, the correct picture prevails over a period of time. And that is what people like Louis and people like me who communicate to the public, we do. And for people like Anandita and Shabana, they do the job among the scientists. So Truth prevails,
you.
whether you like it or not.
Great. Thanks for the great discussion, both Pallav and Lewis. We were really having a good time, and I was just telling in the chat to Robert, I just want to go on with this and not go to the breakout rooms, but that's not fair. We promised our members that we are going to have breakout sessions, so I hand over to Shabana. Shabana, you're muted.
Sorry. Thank you, Anandita. Thank you, Pallava and Louis. Thank you so much for a wonderful discussion. So now we are going to go in 3 breakout rooms, and each breakout room has, again, 2 questions, and all of you are supposed to put your names. There will be 1 presenter, 1 scriber, and 1 moderator. So all 3 of us will be there in 3 different breakout rooms. So we will be also there to support you. And yeah, so the expectation is you are going to brainstorm on those 2 questions and put your points. And if you want to give GYA any take-home message, that would be great. So I think Kirsten is going to help us going to send us in the breakout room. So welcome back, everyone. It's really great to have you back. And all 3 groups are here. So I would like to invite presenter from group 1, which is Almus, to please share the group findings. You need to unmute. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Our group. Okay. So our group members, they were Jennifer, Anna, Abdullah, and Abdullah Bala, and Shabana was the main coordinator. So the first question that we were supposed to discuss was what should the Global Young Academy do concretely to successfully communicate science to and with the public over the next years? So what we discussed was, starting from Abdullah, that we, GYA, can have more sessions like this, first of all, to train the members on the scientific communication, as there are always important things to learn and teach. And another point that was raised was about the training apart from training, we need to start so that we, the GYA members, we can also learn from our mistakes and share with the other GYA fellows. Scientists are sometimes too much into perfectionism, so we should not stay away from social media. Sometimes we have fear as well that, okay, so, we are not the ones who supposed to be there, we are supposed to be in the lab. So there should be also efforts to collaborate with influencers, because obviously we are in the learning stage, and maybe we can learn with the already established and those influencers who have many followers, so we can learn from them from them as well. Narina pointed out a very important strategy to set the goals. We need to see that what are the goals that we as the GYA, we want to achieve that, so that we can work on them and we can see the progress and way to change, what to do and what not to do in future. And we should not try to do it individually, but in unity, because not everyone needs to be an influencer. There are people who are introverts, there are people who are not that much comfortable, sharing their voice or sharing their video, audio. Jennifer said something about something linked to this, that there are small ways of doing things that can help, everyone. And not everyone, again, need to be on video and audio, but people they can influence in different ways. Anna pointed out about the GYA. It was actually the next question, that how can local and international organizations and how can young researchers communicate science in a way that is accessible to everyone, regardless of their economic, social, or political status. So now, there was a very important thing that Anna raised, that sometimes the young scientists, they want to do lots of things. They want to come out of the box, They want to do things in a different way, different than traditional ways of doing certain things. But politically, they're not allowed by their universities or by the high authorities. So the GYA can help, other national young academies for facilitating the process of reaching out to the general public for scientific communication in the local languages, to reach out the common public and let politics work a bit less in this aspect. Bala is, I think, writing something because he was unable to participate through audio, but I think he didn't complete it yet. So this was a contribution by our side.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alice. So the second group was that of Robert. So I'm not sure who was the presenter. So Robert, would you like to introduce?
Yeah, sure. We had our two active members who had either connection problems or had to drop out right now. So I'm going to briefly summarize it. We had the pleasure of Luis joining us, and we could discuss very practical ways of, as Olaf mentioned it, build our trust of the GWA and similar organizations in peacetime or in calmer times, hopefully, so that in crisis times that we are in now, we have these trusted relationships. So he encouraged us to think more about science diplomacy and think about concrete ways of engaging with decision and policy makers. And then we talked a little bit about very practical questions of podcasting and how to implement that in an organization, and more philosophical questions about who is it actually the audience that we want to reach? Is it the mythical average citizen, or is it the lay public at large? Is it the people at the margin who might just be convinced about something? Is it our role to convince? So that was when the discussion was a bit more philosophical. And yeah, we both talked about slow science and the need for slow science journalism. And the problem may be in our current attention economy that both fast science and fast science journalism is rewarded by click algorithms, by social media, and what are good strategies to counteract that. And by no means were 20 minutes enough, so we need to continue that conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Robert. Now I would like to invite Anandita. Please tell us who is going to present from your group.
We have Iraima from the Brazilian Academy who is going to present.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So in our breakout room number 3, we discussed how scientists communicate other challenges related to achieving the SDGs, ranging from education, poverty, health, and environment. And the second question was, in the time crisis like COVID pandemic, how to tackle fake science news. And the moderator was Anindita, and the participants included myself, Beata Wagner, Velia Siciliano, Leila Niamiri, and the speaker was Paliava. I don't know if I talked this correctly. But what we mainly discussed is the need to communicate well what we do. So regarding the need to communicate other challenges, it's important also that we have good communicators that can reach policymakers and not only the general public. And finally, the role of GYA regarding this issue will be to provide courses like workshops that we could train ourselves better and into how to communicate, because it's not everyone that is able to communicate. At least we should try to communicate the word. We do our PhD thesis work to someone that is not in the scientific field to understand what we do actually. And regarding, also Beata told about some really nice initiative in Germany, what's like podcasts, long podcasts of scientists that are discussing the daily basis of scientific achievements, so that the general public can follow up, that science is not like a steady situation that, okay, this is discovered like that and this won't change. So it's like a changing process. And so that people can follow up the scientific method in a daily basis. So I thought that was really interesting as well. And the training, I think the overall discussion is that training is important so that we can communicate better. Pailhava has also talked in his talk about the need to communicate in different languages. Of course, this is not easy, that we acquire this multilingual capacity, but of course, if I'm Brazilian, so I speak Portuguese, so I can communicate well in Portuguese, and this is okay in my country. So each one of us in our countries can communicate well regarding these different languages. And finally, regarding how to tackle fake science news, I think the main idea is that we need to communicate, we need to disclose what we are doing to the main public. So this was the initial discussion also regarding the Brazilian government right now, which is not really supporting science and scientists. But this also forced us during the pandemics to show people what we are doing and to try to communicate better to the general public our value and the value of science in general. So I think this was the overall discussion, and of course that we need training so we can communicate better. Thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much. It really, what is coming out is like we all are inspired to communicate science more. So we have discussed about strategies, trainings, and not just that, also what we can do better or who can communicate. So we have talked about podcasting, local language, and all of that. So with that, I would like to invite Anandita to take it forward.
Thank you, Shabana. We are almost near the end of the session, so thank you for all the three people who presented very nicely about their sessions. We would now like to hear briefly from our office members, Kirsten, Jennifer, Sandra, whoever is here, Anna Maria. So because they are the people who've been really running the show. Pallav commented that we are really doing this in style, going from one room to another. And these are the people who have been really working very hard and keeping the show going. We've just been here, but they've been at work all day. So I invite, because this is the last session, I invite all the members of our office to speak briefly before we close. Kirsten, you want to go first?
Okay, I'll go first. Thank you everyone for joining us on this journey into the world of virtual meetings. It was an incredible experience. I'm sorry. To see so many people from around the world join us for all of these countless live sessions in the past weeks, and there have been a lot. Thank you for your patience, for your kindness, your smiles, and most of all, for your time to help the GYA move forward and adapt even in these difficult times. So please stay healthy, and let's hope we'll see each other really, really soon. Thank you.
Jennifer, you are next on my screen.
Okay, yeah, well, thank you to the moderators as well, and to our speakers and everybody else who is, not everyone's here, but everyone who's helped put all of the panels together. And to you in the audience, and to my fantastic GYA team, who it's a pleasure to work with. Yeah, and I hope everyone who has had a chance to take part in some of the panels or the Google Docs will have some takeaways from the discussions, things you can take home to your own research environment and societal environment. And with that, yeah, I'll pass on to one of my colleagues, and I'm going to post a link in the chat to our feedback survey. So please give us your input on paper too, or digitally.
Thank you, Jennifer. Jim, you're next.
You're mute.
Yes. There we go. Thank you everybody for the opportunity to sit in on these inspiring sessions. Today was particularly interesting to me as the press officer, of course. So we've got some interesting ideas in our pockets now to move forward. It's been really great to see everybody virtually, of course, instead of in person. And yeah, perhaps we'll be seeing more of each other in this format moving forward. But yeah, hopefully one day we'll be able to see each other in person again. Thanks again, and thanks to everybody at the office for your hard work. It's been a pleasure to work as part of the team delivering all of this stuff. So thanks again, everybody. Stay safe and healthy.
Thanks, Jim. Francisca.
Well, the two sentences. I want to thank you all for this great experience we had last weeks, and I wish you all the best and stay safe. Bye.
Anna Maria.
Hi, everyone. I can't really add anything to what my colleagues have already said. And I mean, it's been amazing few weeks meeting all of you online, seeing what the GYA can do, what the office can do in an online setting, and looking forward to seeing all of you either online or in person at, you know, in the near future. Stay safe.
Thanks, Anna Maria. Beata, we'd wrap up the session with you.
I think what stays with me is that these meetings are in one way less intense, but in another way more intense. So electronic meetings, we have learned that they need better preparation. And sometimes this really more structured preparation also helps to more outcome. It's also that more members have an opportunity to participate regardless of their possibility to travel. So there is upsides and downsides with our experiences. And I think Jennifer said that we are interested to hear your feedback. We have heard a lot of feedback already from the electronic AGM, and well, we are already making plans to think how we can improve in the way of producing electronic conversations, enabling electronic conversations of global young scientists. And I think even if we are lucky and COVID will go away eventually in the near future, we have gained a lot and we are in the course, I would say, of gaining a new, more intense cooperative instrument for our working groups and also for the entire AGM. So I'm very happy that we were able to make this experience with the, well, with the GUA membership and the leadership. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Beata. So that brings us to the end of the last session of our first e-conference. And I'm sure we are going to get stuck to this pattern and we are going to do more e-meetings in the future, but we are definitely going to get back to our in-person meetings whenever the pandemic allows us to do so, where we can still shake hands and hug each other and not feel scared of each other. We did miss that opportunity this time. So thanks everyone for being here, especially for Pallav for staying on until the end and spending so much time with us. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we do. Thanks to all the members and alumni who participated in the various sessions throughout the e-conference. The docs are still on there, so please feel free to go and comment. Please share all the videos, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so yet. We will keep sharing the videos and keep spreading the word because we have to communicate and engage better, as we have learned from this session. So thanks everyone, goodbye. But keep in touch, stay safe, and we close the e-conference, at least the live sessions with this session now. Bye.
Bye, everybody.